talk me through this, because we've talked about Trump, we've talked about Biden. Where now does Pence fold in?
If we're talking about where Pence falls in legally, right now, based on the facts that we know, I would say Pence is much closer to Biden. And that's because we see no evidence of willfulness, intent on his part, and certainly no evidence of obstruction. Pence also politically gets the benefit of coming after Biden. And he learned an important lesson from that, which is tell the American people what you learned when you learned it. So we saw that letter from Greg Jacob, his counsel, who's also his counsel in the White House, almost immediately after the discovery, laying out what he was going to do with the National Archives, and then explaining in a second letter the contact he had had both with the National Archives and the Department of Justice.
Right, which, if you're following this closely, really helps clarify this question of intent, and also the piece of it, which is whether or not you complied, proactively wanted to give it back, or whether you said they're mine. We'll come back to that question. Daniela, President Obama signed the Reducing Overclassification Act back in 2010. That's a piece of D.C. lingo, if I ever heard one. Why is the federal government still generating 50 million classified documents every year?
Look, I think in the big picture, one of the really worrying things about this whole scandal is that further erodes American trust in American democracy. You've seen trust erode. If you look 50 years ago, polling from Pew Charitable Trust would say we were at 60%. Trust in American democracy, we're hovering around 20%. So this reinforces that. And, I think what we're dealing with is that the systems of classification, while updated in 2010 with that legislation, have not, in the last decade, we've seen technology change dramatically. We're in a world of remote work with COVID, and the systems are not keeping up with a lot of the reality of how people work. And so, of course, everyone should follow the rules. Certainly heads of state should follow the rules, and they should be taken seriously. But we need to really take a look at the system and make something that actually works and can find the real instances of threats to national security and intent to undermine it.
Well, listen, you handled sensitive material while serving the Secretary of State. Give us a sense of how easy it is for members of the White House, of the administration, to misplace those items, to take them home with them in the middle of a transition.
Look, I think classification is taken really seriously. You're one of the most important things that you're asked to abide by are classification rules. So I don't think this is the norm. But it is clear that as the world has evolved, when you look both at President Biden and Vice President Pence, they were operating under COVID. They were operating in a world where technology has evolved significantly. So I think that creates the potential that materials are moved where they shouldn't be. And even though there was that 2010 legislation, there still is overclassification. And I think a real look at modernizing the system is still required.
Lisa, my friend, so last week you and I sat here and I made this argument that, to me, I feel like a lot of what we need to talk about is the system. And then I sort of, because I'm sensitive, felt like you were subtweeting me, where you said, well, it's not just the system, right? There actually was malfeasance here. So tease that out for me, right? Because I agree with you. I want to be very clear that we agree that, that you can look at it as both end.
You can totally look at it as both end. And Alicia, I want to also say that you were right when you referred to this as system failures with a plural, right? We have three systems here that are broken, at least. The overclassification of documents, the way that documents are handled and disposed of within the White House. And then the third system that needs to be reevaluated is how people leave the White House. It's like, as you said when we were talking before the segment, people move out of their houses all the time, and the day that the movers come, things get thrown into
supermarket
boxes.
Sweepstakes.
Correct. But imagine that you had to function in your house with every piece of paper right in front of you up until the moment the movers came. That's what it's like to be in the White House, and that's a system that right now needs to be reassessed.
Lisa, lawmakers are calling for the DOJ to share more details of the two special counsel investigations. Take a listen.
I think the public deserves some account of what is in these documents. Obviously, if they're classified yet, they can't be released publicly in full. But I think we can get the broad outlines. And I think the public, particularly as it relates to the sitting president of the United States, they probably deserve to know.
The sitting president of the United States, even though the documents are from when he was vice president, so like a
or before, right?
Or before, right when he was a U.S. senator. I just wonder when you expect we will get some of that information, not just about Biden, but I think sort of across the board. I think people want to know what these documents were.
I think we're going to get some of that information, unfortunately, in drips and drabs through public reporting. But if you're asking me, when will we hear that information from the Department of Justice? We'll hear that information when the investigation is complete. There was some reporting earlier this week from the New York Times about the Durham investigation, which was also, at its end, a special counsel investigation. John Durham wanted to release an interim report, and his deputy, Nora Danahy, resigned sort of in a huff because she felt it was totally inappropriate to do that before the investigation was completed. I think Merrick Garland will be particularly sensitive to that, and I don't expect that we'll really hear much about either investigation until there is a decision about whether to charge and or a report to the Attorney General that then is released to the public.
Danielle, I've got about 30 seconds left, but I'm curious, going back to sort of your point about public trust, where you see the special counsel, where you see DOJ factoring into that?
Well, I think the factor of trust here is something that we look at a lot in my organization, because Leadership Now Project is focused on how business can play a role in rebuilding trust in our government and our democracy. And instances like this are making it very difficult for us to make the case that we need a strong, effective democracy and that our government can live up to that. So, I think the way that the DOJ approaches this, the way that Congress approaches this, is a critical moment to show that the government can be proactive, can rebuild trust in the midst of a lot of factors that are undermining it right now.